What's going on, Digital Wildcatters? Welcome to another week of the Oil and Gas Startups Podcast. Got a fun episode today. So we got I want to say longtime buddy, but actually we haven't known each other that long, maybe 6 months or so, but it seems like a long time. We got,
Go back through the Twitter worlds.
actually, we go back to Nate Party of 2020. That's when we first met. So good times. Got my buddy Griffin with Limpia Creek. It's just Limpia Creek, right?
Technologies.
Limpia Creek Technologies. And then we got Parker with Unchained Capital. How you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Doing good? Man, I'm excited about this this episode. It's something that I'm passionate about, which is Bitcoin mining off of natural gas and energy assets. And really hot topic. We've had a few episodes where, we've had Crusoe, we've had J Energy, and both of those guys have different philosophies and theses when it comes to mining Bitcoin. Griffin, I know that Limpia Creek has y'all's own thesis, and then Unchained Capital met you guys recently, and y'all have been doing these Bitcoin meetups in Houston, which really, surprised by the Bitcoin community in Houston. Like, it seems to be growing and getting big. And like, I met a developer on Twitter, and he just moved to Houston, and he's a crypto developer, and he's like, yeah, this is the place to be at for cryptocurrency. And that blows my mind, because 2 years ago, like, there wasn't anyone involved with crypto here. Like, is that what you're seeing? Like, are people getting interested in it?
So I'm pretty new to it, myself. But when we started looking, there was like a kind of a small, very small, kind of group doing the meetups. And then Unchained gets involved, put some gasoline on there, and it's just been the energy there is great. Like, it's the buzz of, like, you kind of feel the revolution coming.
Yeah.
And it's just really good.
Well, so
Definitely hit them up.
Yeah, so it was probably June. I was driving down from, I'm based in Austin. We're based in Austin.
Yeah.
But I was in Dallas, and I was driving down from Dallas to Houston. And one of our good friends from the Bitcoin community had recently moved to Houston and decided that he was going to start a Bitcoin meetup. And I think there were probably about 20 people in an office in May. And on the way down, I gave him a call. I was like, we're going to do the Bitcoin meetup in Houston, right? And we host the Austin Bitcoin Developers Meetup. We refer to it as BitDevs in Austin. And we pack 200 people into an office that, normally has about 15 people working in it.
Yeah.
There's about 70 people at our company, but 15 people work from the Austin office. And so we've built a really strong community in Austin. And I just had a moment of clarity where, knowing Bitcoin very well and knowing the Houston community and knowing the tie between Bitcoin and energy, that if we built it and created the right forum, that we draw all the oil and gas, energy, power producers into the Bitcoin orbit. And so from basically coming down to participate in the meetup in June, and then starting to promote it in July, and then really for the first time we had an actual space and organized. We had probably just under 200 people.
Yeah.
And the last one, it might have been close to 250.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot to Bitcoin, and energy has a massive role to play in it. So we just knew if we put those two things together that it would become its own animal, and it has been and will continue to be.
Amen.
Yeah. I mean, I went to the last Bitcoin meetup, and it was just really surprising to see how many people I knew from my oil and gas network that were there, and a lot of people that I didn't expect to see there. And I've always been really bullish on Houston. I think Houston is one of the most opportunistic cities that there is. And then really started realizing in the last couple of months since being at that meetup, I was like, oh shit, like, this could be a big play for Houston. You talk about energy, the role energy plays in the Bitcoin network, and man, we're the energy capital of the world. So why would we not be a Bitcoin capital of the world as well?
I agree with you 100%. You have like a bunch of people that is just free market capitalism at like their core in Houston. Then like oil and gas, energy, having like an energy backed money, we get it a lot faster, than everyone else. And then having just the natural resources in the state of Texas, where a lot of people are headquartered out here. And then just, yeah, Houston, it's all about the green.
Yeah,
And
it's
they,
kind
and
of
they,
like
they
this
just get it.
like perfect storm of different elements that have kind of set the stage for Houston and Texas to become a Bitcoin hub and a mining hub. So, I know we have a lot of listeners and people in the digital wildcatters community that, they hear me and others talking about Bitcoin mining off of natural gas, but they may not even understand the concept of Bitcoin mining. Can we talk about that a little bit to get this conversation started? And then I also want to talk about, um, we can transition into like Unchained Capital and what you guys do and what your part of the mining process is in terms of custodial services, and then I want to dive into mining off of nat gas. 'Cause Griffin, you were a landman by trade,
Land
right?
dog, yeah,
All right, cool.
through and
So
through.
it's gonna be a wild show anytime we get a landman on here. So Parker, do you want to talk a little bit about like what is Bitcoin mining and what is the Bitcoin network? Just kind of high level overview of it.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of people that have stared at Bitcoin for a long time. There's a recognition that initially doesn't make a lot of sense. That it's not intuitive. There's 1,000 cryptocurrencies, and there's Bitcoin, and what about Bitcoin makes it so different than everything else? And that I think one of the things that Griffin was talking about in terms of why this place, Houston, is so naturally set up to be a Bitcoin hub, that it extends beyond energy, it extends the entrepreneurial spirit, but that when you look at Bitcoin and you don't understand it at the macro level, what I've noticed in the energy community is those that get into mining, that the mining process, it's an intuitive, or sorry, it's a not intuitive process, but what it's effectively doing is securing the Bitcoin network. It's ensuring that the Bitcoin network is distributed and that ownership of the network and validation of the network are separate. But the way to think about it at the top level is the energy that the Bitcoin network is consuming is securing the network and ensuring that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, and that all Bitcoin transactions are valid, and that you can't have invalid Bitcoin, and that the more energy that the Bitcoin network consumes, the more secure the network becomes. And that really is what mining is. But that when I step back and I explain to people, well, why is this network valuable in the first place? Why does it demand the amount of energy that it does to secure it? That someone could never understand why Bitcoin mining is necessary, or why the energy that it consumes is worth the benefit. That they see the cost, but they don't understand the benefit. And probably without going too far down the rabbit hole and understanding that Bitcoin is not intuitive, is that Bitcoin is a monetary network that guarantees one thing: that if you opt into it voluntarily and store your wealth in Bitcoin, that the unit of currency cannot be debased. That the reason why Bitcoin is valuable, if I was to distill it for folks, is that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, and that is enough. That the entire world needs a form of money that can't be printed, and that everybody has a $1 trillion problem, and that is governments all over the world printing trillions of dollars. Bitcoin solves one of the most fundamental needs, and the energy ultimately ensures the security of that network.
That's what, one of the biggest complaints I get from the oil and gas community, or not complaints, but questions, is why would we convert our nation's resources into energy to mine a fake currency? And I'm like, first off, a fake currency is a $1 trillion asset class currently. Like, there's nothing fake about a $1 trillion asset class. But my thing is like, why do you not have an issue with the energy that, the AWS network consumes? Why do you only have an issue with the Bitcoin network? And for me, the value of Bitcoin is in the network. And that's why I think, proof of work is so important, because that's what makes the network valuable, is that it does consume energy, and it takes that energy to secure the network. And someone asked me on Twitter yesterday, like, well, what do you think about all of these new cryptocurrencies using proof of stake. And I was like, well, first off, I believe every cryptocurrency outside of Bitcoin is a shit coin.
Correct.
And I also think proof of stake is a scam. Like it literally removes why I think the Bitcoin network is valuable. And that's because it takes effort and energy to secure that network. And that's, that's kind of my answer to those guys. I don't know if y'all have seen some of those same remarks.
Yeah, I say proof of work, in the oil field, you start out with a geologist going out, shooting seismic, prospecting. Then, landman comes in, leases up acreage. These are all like processes. Then, you get your permits. Then you get the drilling rig out there. Then you turn to the right. Then you actually produce something. So you have the proof of work in the process of, you didn't just wake up and this thing's flowing oil, right? You have to have all of these different steps to get there. And that is the work. So if somebody I guess you could hit like a PUD deal. If somebody's like, no, this proof of stake is, look how many wells you can drill here. It's like, well, I would much rather have something that is requiring electricity like a pump jack, that is doing the work, and it takes time, right? And so with Bitcoin mining, you have to have energy, you have to have semiconductors, and you have to have time.
Mm-hmm.
And the proof of work is the security that Parker was talking about is just so important, because it's the easiest way. I never planned on being like a toxic maxi by any means, but knowing how hard it is to mine Bitcoin, even like we're doing it in the oil field or you're doing it in your garage, it is not just, plug it in and just count your money. And you just all of a sudden you walk up and Bitcoins are flying out of the thing, right? It takes time. You're getting little fractions. You're paying electricity bills. You're replacing, PDUs. And the longer that you actually have to, keep the miners running, you totally respect proof of work. Mm-hmm. And that's where you don't even look at the other coins, because you know that there is only one, that the proof of work is so legitimate that it's decentralized and everything, to the point to where it's a no-brainer. You found the winner. Now let's just make sure the network keeps rocking.
I love how you said you never intentionally wanted to become a Bitcoin maxi, but I mean, it's like the same thing for me. Is when I first started buying Bitcoin, back in 2016 or 2017, I was also buying altcoins too. And I was like, oh, this project. And the more I really started to understand, I just gravitated towards Bitcoin because that's what made sense. One thing, I think that's, you talked about the type of people that are here in Houston and Texas and the oil field specifically. My 65-year-old stepdad, hardcore West Texas boy, born and raised, completions consultant, spent his entire life in the oil field. He didn't really need to understand the technicalities of Bitcoin or how, the mechanics of how it worked. All he needed to understand was the supply. Hey, 21 million Bitcoin, it can't be diluted. That's all he needed to understand. And it was a very easy story to, tell him and to get him converted. And Griffin, you can talk on this a little bit, but I think what's really interesting about Bitcoin mining is how much it looks like mining hydrocarbons from a business model perspective. You have, you just talked about proof of work, which you had some great analogies in the oil field, but also, you have things in oil assets that can be related to difficulty, completions designs and reservoir properties,
pipeline pressure.
All of those different types of things are analogous to difficulty. And then, the economics are really driven by, underlying commodity price. And now you have the ability to use financial instruments to hedge out that commodity. And so it looks so much like,
this is why oil guys get it.
Yeah, it looks so much like oil and gas. Someone asked me on Twitter the other day, why do they even call it mining? I'm like, well, if you actually looked at it, it is very much like mining. And I think when you start to explain that to people like oil and gas guys, they start to get it, because it looks like the business that they're already in. Just instead of using rigs to mine hydrocarbons, you're using miners to mine Bitcoin.
And what I've learned is a Bitcoin miner loves two things. It hates heat and dust, but the two things that it loves is freedom and cheap energy. And if you look in the world right now, like where is that magnet? And it is Texas, right? Like you have the cheapest, most reliable energy from any source. Then in the future, there's a ton of wind in the Panhandle. There's a ton of sun in West Texas. We know there's a ton of oil. We know there's a ton of gas. We know that there's uranium down in South Texas. Like, so the future for the like longevity of this cheap energy, the more different sources that it's coming from on that grid, the more reliable that grid is, the more, if one commodity spike happens, you can always balance it with, other commodity sources, to where the like electricity is almost going to get cheaper and cheaper the more mining that actually happens here, because like we call it the Chexit, right? The Chinese kicked out all of their miners, and this is, we know, at one point like 60% of the hash rate just all of a sudden is unplugging.
Pulled off.
So those guys are scouring the globe for where is a cheap source of energy that I'm not going to get kicked out. I'm not going to invest in all this infrastructure and then find out that the government says not today.
Yeah.
Have a nice life. So the a lot of them found their way to like Kazakhstan, and I don't know if y'all are keeping up with, but like Kazakhstan is, their grid is getting hammered, and all of a sudden got this energy crisis coming with it. And now they are going to have to stop the mining. And Putin's over here like, I'm not giving y'all any more gas, but if you want to bring those miners over here, come on down. And so all of a sudden, everybody that went, some went to Scandinavia, which is higher electricity, but better governments and weather.
Yeah.
But then the Texas scene is just absorbing this, huge exodus of all of this hash rate that is going to end up in Texas. The infrastructure is getting built out right now.
Yeah.
And I don't say this dramatically, but we could see like the largest like transfer of wealth in human history, all because the politics here are, leave me alone, go make money.
Well, you're seeing the support from Greg Abbott,
Ted
Cruz,
Ted
they're
Cruz,
talking about it, man.
Cornyn was at a blockchain deal.
Yeah.
Ton of like the local or the state reps, state senators.
I've talked to Chinese miners that were moving from the Exodus, and very top of mind for them was regulatory. And they're like, we hear Texas is going to be very friendly to this. And one thing I think that's really interesting to think about is, a lot of people don't know, but Texas is the leading state in wind power. And
it's not even close.
Yeah, it's not even close.
Not even close.
And just say that you're putting out 25 gigawatts of output in West Texas, but you only have 5 gigawatts of takeaway capacity. Why would you not have miners out on those locations and converting that wasted electricity into something of value? And it actually becomes everyone talks about the Bitcoin network consuming energy and being bad for the planet, but it can actually enable renewable projects that weren't economic without a subsidized basis. They almost have to have. Yeah, they do. Yeah. They have to with the intermittent nature of them. Like they have to have it, and it can actually enable that.
Well, another thing that, because I kind of view it to use a bad movie reference. It's like a lot of the Bitcoin community, I think recognize a problem with our money. I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody, but generally when people find the signal in Bitcoin, they figure out that governments all over the world are printing trillions of dollars. Bitcoin is the solution to that. And that, from the Patriot, that one of those last scenes where the dude's, carrying the tattered American flag. It's like we see like we're fighting a big fight, and that everyone, like the energy industry, like, they've been beaten down by ESG and all these things. And we kind of are the people carrying the flag to be like, no, like run the other way. Like that's the wrong fight. And that there's this connection between money and energy. And it kind of comes back to something that you said, where when people look at the cost of the Bitcoin network and they say, why are we consuming our natural resources that are scarce to this fake money, right? That there is something about Bitcoin where if people have the humility to recognize before Bitcoin, they never questioned what money was.
Yeah.
Right. But then everybody's opinionated on what is and isn't money. And then they say Bitcoin's not money and that's a waste of resources. And that if they just have the humility to stop and think about what the actual function of money is, what makes something a good form of money or worse, that they actually have to go through that process before they can actually understand or conceive of the benefit of Bitcoin. And that you know people always do cost benefit analysis. If you do not understand the benefit of something, you are categorically unqualified to assess the cost. And the analogy that you used of AWS, it's the same thing with like Xbox. I don't play Xbox. I don't understand the value that Xbox delivers a gamer, you know, for playing 4 hours a day. That's the same thing about Bitcoin, except the function of money. It's not something about greed. It's about coordinating economic activity. And especially for energy folks, I use the analogy of Venezuela, that I'm not traditionally an oil and gas or energy or power producing person, but as I've interacted more with Bitcoin, it's naturally brought me that way. Coming down here in Houston and helping organize the Bitcoin meetup here, it's that you look at a country like that used to be one of the wealthiest countries in the world, that has the most, if not one of the most natural resource countries underneath the soil. They don't have a form of money to get the natural resources out of the ground and then refine it. That when money breaks down, energy inputs, energy outputs break down, and wealth is destroyed and poverty explodes. And so the connection between money and energy, getting energy out of the ground, getting it midstream, getting it downstream to then refine it and then to turn it into consumer products, that if you do not have a good form of money, you cannot get energy out of the ground. And so realistically, how I think about it is money is the first order, energy is the second order. And in the case of Bitcoin, they are so closely tied that what Bitcoin is providing us, and why one of the reasons of coming down here and organizing a meetup here, is we need more energy people that understand how to get resources out of the ground, turn it into power, and then secure the Bitcoin network, because that Bitcoin is ultimately going to secure our ability to get energy out of the ground. Like, think about what happened in Venezuela. They cannot literally get their trading currency, which is oil, out of the ground, and now they can't get power, clean water, basic healthcare. Like, that is what happens when money breaks down. And when you print trillions of dollars of it, money breaks down. And if Bitcoin wasn't here and people look at it and say, oh, what happened in Venezuela can't happen here, it is the same damn thing, right? Yeah. And so I do think that there is a reality that Bitcoin will incentivize the development of types of natural resources that otherwise would be uneconomical. But I also think that the real fight is understand the benefit of Bitcoin, and you have to question how money works and what money works. And I myself, pretty much anyone who gets into Bitcoin, they have to realize they've never asked the question, why do 325 million people accept dollars? And what are the consequences of the federal government printing trillions of dollars? Because when they start to question those fundamental questions, they start to understand money, and they start to understand why Bitcoin can be money and why its 21 million supply is the foundation of that monetary system. And the highest and best use of energy resources is securing the money.
Yeah. My favorite comments about Bitcoin are always the ones, you know, about it has no value, it's fake. And you start questioning, like, what makes the US dollar valuable? It's 100% faith in the currency. It's not backed by anything. It's faith in the currency. And, you know, to deny Bitcoin is to deny basic economic principles of, one, supply and demand, and two, network effects. And the Bitcoin network has been running, 12, 13 years now, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And network effects don't stop. They keep growing, right? And they keep expanding. And, one person, if they listen to this podcast and they change their mind about Bitcoin and they join the network, that's how it works. And so
and we're still so early.
And we're still so early. And one thing that I want to talk about a little bit too, like I would love to, hear y'all's thoughts on this as well as, I think that this Strike integration on Twitter to be able to use the Bitcoin Lightning Network and really think, about Bitcoin as a protocol be able to build on the rails of it. Like I think that's some of the most innovative technology as well. And, that's hard for people to understand of, you talk about the network and it's like, look, AWS host about, let's call it a third of the internet roughly. And the internet is built on a series of protocols. You had IP and HTTP, and no one gives a shit about that. Like people just care about, hey, I type in Google, I can go to Google and I can search something. And, I think Bitcoin has to reach that point too, to where, people don't care that they don't care about how the Lightning Network works. They don't care that, it's a second layer protocol. They just care about, like, oh, hey, I can send someone money using the Bitcoin rails, or, I can use Bitcoin as a store of value. And I think that, people have to challenge their assumptions when they look at, okay, like I just can't stand when people are like, there's no value. It's a fake currency. Like your point is like, hey, I don't play Xbox. I don't think the Xbox network is valuable, and that uses a shitload of energy. So we shouldn't use energy for that. Like I think that there is a lot of value in the Bitcoin network. And you just have to question your assumptions on money. It's
Yeah.
like, why do you believe in the US dollar? Like, trust me, I don't want the US dollar to collapse. But when, 40% of all US dollars in circulation have been printed in, the last year, like that's worrisome. Like, how do you not have hyperinflation, or at least risk of hyperinflation happen? So, I don't know how anyone like roots against Bitcoin,
Yeah.
because it literally helps every person on the planet, right?
Yeah, and that's something that people don't understand. Because they fundamentally have never questioned realistically what money is, and its importance. And like literally, if you lose your money, not like lose it in the sewer, but if money breaks down, you do not get water at your house. Like the comforts that we have come to enjoy and taken for granted literally break down. Water, healthcare, gas at the gasoline station, and
Yeah.
that the the idea that I think you bring up, which is the right one, is that the first people that are the early adopters, which we are still in an early adoption phase, they have to contemplate these questions. They Before you're willing to store wealth in the Bitcoin network and to start to see Bitcoin intuitively as money, you have to naturally, if you're one of the first crazy 10 million or next 10 million or next 10 million. But just like we all use the telephone, I've worked in the telecom industry and I know half of it, but most people don't have any concept of how to use or how the telephone actually works, how
Hmm.
magic happens when they pick up the phone and they talk to someone across the
Yeah.
world. Sometimes we're like, that's a hard problem, right? But
Man, that's true. I have no fucking clue how that works, and use the phone
right,
every day. I've never thought about it.
right. And, this past weekend, we had a bunch of Bitcoiners in Austin for the F1 race. And I was explaining to some friends that were in town, like the fundamentals of Bitcoin, why it was valuable. Um, and it's usually deer in headlights the first time. But then later that night, we were at a big dinner. One of our friends, Jimmy Song, who's an engineer, I'm not sure if he's a core developer. I think he might have some core contributions, but he has a book called Thank God for Bitcoin, and it makes the moral case for Bitcoin. But he was selling copies of the book, and I bought one for one of my friends, and he just pulls up a Lightning invoice. I take out my phone, I pay the invoice, little check mark comes up, he gives me the book. And the reality is this is going to be so easy to use. The monetary network is actually being built. If people just see a price trading on a screen and think of it as any other financial asset, they should come to the Houston Bitcoin meetup. They should come to Awesome Bit Devs. What's actually happening is a monetary network is being built by people. And over time, just like the telephone, it's going to be so easy to use that no one's going to consciously have to consider these questions about money. The last 95%, it's just going to be money, and they're going to go to the grocery store and they're going to use Bitcoin because it's going to be the only form of money that people accept. And one of the other comments you made about, kind of people look at this, doesn't make sense, shut it off. It's been going on for 12 years. It is in total storing more than $1 trillion worth of value. And one of my favorite quotes from the Bitcoin Standard, which I recommend everybody read, is that you cannot insulate yourself from others holding a harder form of money than you. And that's what Bitcoin is. It is a harder form of money than what most people hold. And if people just close their eyes and act like it doesn't exist. To me, it's like the equivalent of the kid who's playing hide and seek that's in the corner and puts his hand over his eyes and doesn't think that everybody else can see him. That is the equivalent of people thinking that they can turn away and not pay attention to Bitcoin, because you do so at your own risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to talk about, let's direct the conversation over to the energy side a little bit. Bitcoin mining off of natural gas is really becoming a thing. And, there's been a small group of people, I was talking about it in 2017. You had a small group of people start carrying it out in 2018 and actually doing it. But I'd say over, the last, let's call it 6 to 8 months, like it's really started getting legs, and people are, legit people are asking questions about it, and, people are really getting interested. And, to have,
Price of Bitcoin will help that out.
the price of Bitcoin will help that out too, for sure.
And GU technology.
Yeah. And, the thing is, there's a lot of questions around mining off of nat gas. And I think, let's talk about Unchained Capital real quick and what you guys do, because it's actually a really important problem and solution that you guys are providing. And so, if I go buy Bitcoin, let's just say I go buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, and I can leave my Bitcoin on Coinbase, but I don't necessarily like own that Bitcoin, and then I have risk of Coinbase getting hacked and losing my share of that Bitcoin. So the way that you secure that Bitcoin is, you go get a cold storage wallet, which is, essentially a USB drive, and you put your Bitcoin on that, and then you got a private key, and you're the only one that knows that private key. Very secure. Problem is, I drive home after this podcast, I get hit head on by a truck, I die. Now my wife doesn't have the ability to access, my wallet, and oh shit, I got a few $100,000 worth of Bitcoin in there, and she can't get access to it. So you have this custody issue. And so, correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding of Unchained Capital, but essentially, you guys have three signatures, or three permissions for Bitcoin storage. So you, myself, and Griffin, say that we're JV on a partnership on a mine, and we have a wallet that has Bitcoin. Each one of us has a signature that we need for approval to be able to transfer that Bitcoin or access that. Is that kind of a fair high level view of what Unchained does in the custody service?
Yeah. So the way to think about Unchained relative to, say, a Coinbase is Coinbase holds the keys. They're not your keys, they're their keys. It operates much like a bank. And if you ever read a bank account statement, the dollars in the bank are not yours, they're theirs. It's similar to that in Bitcoin. If your Bitcoin are in Coinbase, and there was just a report a week or two ago about how 6,000 Coinbase accounts were hacked and drained.
Mm-hmm.
That when you're talking about Bitcoin is a digital bearer asset. And so the important thing to know is when I talk about 21 million Bitcoin and that being the fundamental value, there's technically speaking only 18.8 million that are in circulation today. So there's another 2.2 million to be mined, but that all of those Bitcoin that are in circulation are controlled by keys. And then the question becomes, who has control of the keys? In the case of Coinbase, they have control of the keys. And if you want access to your Bitcoin, you have to ask for permission. It's a permissioned set of security principles. In the world of Unchained, we help people hold their own keys, and we hold keys alongside them. So as you were saying, there's 3 keys, and 2 of them are required to move any Bitcoin. Generally speaking, we hold 1 key and our clients hold 2. In the case of a business, it might be 2 principals, each hold 1 key. And if they need to collaborate with Unchained, there's financial controls in place to be able to ensure that, there's permissions from the people of the business. If it's an individual, they just hold 2 of their own keys. The benefit of that is you have permissionless access to your wealth, and you don't have the counterparty risk of a financial institution. And that the longer that somebody holds Bitcoin, the more they start to understand the importance of it actually is achievable to do that. And that when you do it, when you're talking about all Bitcoin being controlled by keys that live in physical form, you give that power up when you use something like Coinbase. And that in our world, we help people accelerate the path to being able to do that securely. Just like you said, if you're holding a single key, and it's one of the most unique things about Bitcoin is that, and it differentiates it from something like a commodity money, that you can have a finitely scarce asset, and that asset can literally live not in a single place. And that ensures also that it can't be seized. If you are using what's referred to, and it's the scripting language native to Bitcoin called multisig. Multisig is native to Bitcoin. How we apply it in our application is proprietary. But the most important thing of it is that our clients retain ownership of keys. That is a fundamentally more secure position, not just from a counterparty risk perspective, but you literally sever the internet connection. You were talking about cold storage, that thinking about while you're at sleep, somebody's constantly trying to steal your Bitcoin. How do you protect against that? Disconnect it from the internet, and then create a approach to custody where you eliminate all single points of failure. You get hit by a bus, your wife, family still has access to a second key location. But there is a fundamental difference between somebody being in a position, and it's a very powerful position to put in yourself, to hold money where you could literally go anywhere in the world and no financial institution or no person could prevent you from accessing your money. That actually, the more people are doing that, the more secure the Bitcoin network is as well.
Absolutely. Griffin, a solution like that is important. You look at like Limpia Creek, and you guys are mining, both off of nat gas, and you're working on substations off the grid, correct? Yep. So as you build out a company and you're mining Bitcoin as a product, it's important for you guys to be able to have solutions like that, right?
Yep.
Where
and we use Unchained.
There you go. Well,
we have a
proud client
petroleum
employee.
engineer, a geologist, and a landman holding keys.
Yeah. What could go wrong?
Welcome to 2021.
And that's what Unchained does. It helps a landman, a petroleum engineer be able to hold keys.
But
But it is a key thing that it's their wealth. It's their company's wealth. And there's nothing, if Unchained filed for bankruptcy or had some sort of other problem, they have their money. They can move it. It's not part of an estate. They don't have to ask for permission. And they do need to understand the responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. But that is what we do. And miners, especially those that understand Bitcoin, begin to accumulate Bitcoin.
Yeah. And I think, if you look at what are some of the barriers to scaling out the operations of Bitcoin mining in the oil field, it's going to be custody related issues like that. So, you have those technological solutions now, via Unchained. It sounds like we were just talking about this briefly before we got on the mic. The supply issues with miners is a big deal. Being able to, you look at oil and gas operations. I mean, they're very intricate supply chain operations, right? I mean, sourcing pipe and rigs and service crews. I mean, we were very good at supply chain and logistics in this industry. And some of the hiccups right now that you have are, where do you buy 100 miners? It's hard to get your hands on them. What are some of the other barriers that you see
on the scalability side?
Yeah.
So like chasing like stranded gas, that like we got started. I'm in Lubbock. I'm talking to a buddy and Connor, and the kind of once we got to talking, he had this well. He drills a well. It's looking for oil. He's chasing reefs, wildcatting out in like Central Texas. And then he hits this reef and it is just gas. And the closest pipeline is 19 miles. So the reserves in this said well weren't big enough to ever economically justify that pipeline. Then he had high nitrogen content. So if he made it to the pipeline, he's still going to get docked. So the only, like, you look at, like, can I maybe freeze some liquids, strip them off? Is there any sort of like small factory I can manufacture? Just use this energy, put something to work, like just this unmonetized asset sitting there. And then Steve Barber, the upstream Canadian, got together, and the only way to literally, that gas would still be sitting in the ground today if it were not for Bitcoin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you get the containers, fill them full of miners, and you're running gen sets out there. And as much as like you'd love to put 100 megawatts out there, there's just not enough gas there, or you'd build the pipeline. So it's hard to scale that way. And then especially like we're doing a flared deal in New Mexico, and it's more or less drilling for oil, but there's going to be some gas, can't flare in New Mexico. So you can get, as long as you're chasing like an asset that's going to be like within the same county, scaling is not that bad because it's come down to like labor. Like the silos, you need a guy to run your gen set, like a mechanic. You need a pumper to make sure that the gas is flowing. You need an electrician when it comes to everything, when it comes to Bitcoin mining.
We decided on our podcast with J Energy that the IT guys that actually service the miners, we're just going to call them pumpers too.
Okay, I like
as
that.
Old ad, kind of a
Yes.
nod to the pumpers of the oil field.
I respect that. I'm down with that.
Yeah, to get on board. We're just going to call them pumpers.
Yes. And so that's so pumpers and pumpers and pumpers.
Yeah.
And then the hardware, the software, the firmware of getting all of the machines up and running and staying running. That's like kind of your deal. So last thing you want to do is be in like 4 different states running one mine, right? And then because you got to have a team of pumpers, set pumpers. But if you can scale, and like this is where like the midstream, I think, is going to really play a key role in here, because you don't have to worry about the mineral owner and that drama. It is more or less.
Okay, you can't just like hop over that.
I tried.
Let's talk about it real quick, because got a lot of people on Twitter. Anytime you talk about this, they're like, "Oh, what about the mineral owners? How are they going to be treated?" I'm like, look. If you think about have you ever had a mineral owner be like, "Oh, I'm entitled to whatever electricity is generated off of that peaker plant"? No,
not once in my life.
You get paid spot price at the gathering station, and then that's the transaction, and that's how it works. And when I look at Bitcoin mining, it's like you're literally taking the downstream process and moving it, boom, just right to the wellhead. So hey, look, you get paid spot price, or you take your gas in kind, and then you get your own miners out there and you mine it if you want to mine Bitcoin. But for some reason, a lot of people, like, that's their main sticking point, is I think it's the worst talking point, and seems to come from a lot of attorneys that I think that they see money signs, they see some legal fees.
A lot of people just ready to die on that hill too, which I don't really understand.
But I'm like, okay, look, if it's going to be that big of a problem, look, we'll just, you set up a midstream entity, you gather the gas, and then you just pull it off that, and you have an arm's length transaction. And, I think that you look at midstream, and that's like really where the low hanging fruit is in my mind. You just pull off the
It's
tap.
hard to talk to midstreamers at $6 gas though, right? They're partying right now. So like they don't really have time for you. Cause, and the other things, like, so I've been a mineral owner, like Peyton and I started Mountain Lion Oil and Gas, and we just bought minerals and royalties. And like, this is, as a mineral owner, how can I get more Bitcoin? I demand that I get my lease, like, paid in Bitcoin. Instead of getting a monthly check, tell them, here's my wallet, send money here. That's the answer for mineral owners, is just get paid in Bitcoin off of your gas's value, off of your oil's value.
If you want Bitcoin, just collect sats instead of dollars. Yeah.
I think that as a mineral guy, that's how I'm going to get more coins.
Yeah.
Is by demanding, because they're not going to do it. Like, you're going to have to hold their hand. Don't get me wrong. It's going to be kind of a progressive deal. And I'll take an 1/8 royalty just to get like my, QR code on the oil and gas lease in the courthouse. And I mean, I'm happy to help others, with that route. and I think that that's like where the future's going. I remember Parker saying, like, until people demand it, it's not going to happen, but you see it being demanded every day.
Yeah.
I'm talking for the first time in my life last week, a mineral owner in like the Eagleford has like a flare going off on his place. And he more or less like wants to be on the side, but he doesn't know how he can get in. So his leverage is the oil and gas company wants to take a lease on his other acreage that's, you know, currently not producing. And so his now negotiation is, let's get some Bitcoin mining going here. I'm good to take it in kind, but you got to make sure that I can run my mine here and everybody wins, and then I'll happily sign your deal. And that's what you're going to see. It's not going to be some guy in retrospect, you know, demanding what it, because if you start saying the use after it goes from gas and turns into anything else, are you going to have to go and, you know, grandfather all these old leases in and say, okay, well, now we've got to start tracking where that gas or where that oil got processed.
Where's that molecule going? What's it being turned into?
Is it a plastic bottle and Coke?
You're entitled. You're entitled to that refined
You're gonna get those margins too. No,
it's like, no, I think 100% that, you know, any lease from, you know, 2020 or 2021 moving forward, you know, you're gonna have to look out for, because, you know, it'd be like this guy where he's like, hey, look, you know, I want to take my gas in kind, and I'm going to have miners out there, and you got to make sure that I have my supply. But yeah, I just like, you know, I'm not a title attorney, I'm not a landman, but I just like, does not make, I come from a family of landmen, you know, I tell my dad about it, and he's like, why the hell would they be entitled to the Bitcoin? I'm like, I don't know, but that's like what a lot of people think right now. So that'll be interesting. But, you know, I think what's, you know, what's cool about this conversation right now is, you know, we got a couple oil guys, and me and Griffin here, you know, we come from different backgrounds. You know, I come from roughnecking and drilling and completing wells. He comes from the land side, but then we got Parker over here, you know, from, you know, Bitcoin perspective, and in Austin. But what's also interesting about Unchained Capital is that you guys have oil and gas backers too, and Stronghold, and then, you know, a couple of individual oil and gas guys. And so it's kind of this convergence of Bitcoin and tech and Austin culture, and then, you know, Houston and the oil culture. And, you know, I took these Chinese miners to tour a site, a natural gas site up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I can't even describe this scene. Like, I can't articulate it, but it was just kind of so bizarre. You know, I got these Chinese guys walking around with their Binance backpacks, and then I got these redneck oil field guys, and I was just like, dude, this is the most bizarre clash of cultures I've ever seen in my life. But in that moment, I'm like, this is fucking awesome. Yeah. Like, this is so, like, this doesn't look like anything that I've ever experienced or, you know, read about in books. And you just see these cultures colliding. And so, you know, I think that one, it's going to take this collaboration. You know, you need the energy professionals, you know, these professional miners, you know, say they're coming from China, like, they don't understand natural gas assets. They don't understand, you know, wind and solar. And you have energy companies here in the US that have access and have the ability to operate these assets and put miners out there. And I think that's like where the magic happens. And so everything that's happening, you know, within the Bitcoin community, and, you know, what Unchained's doing with the meetups, I think is super important. I think it's vital.
Yeah. And there is a convergence happening between Bitcoin and energy, and that will only continue to accelerate. I think, you know, the ideas that we talked about before, Bitcoin is not intuitive. That's okay. The beautiful thing about what I have seen in the short time that I've been coming down here to Houston, I'm from Texas, I'm from Austin, so I'm very familiar. But specifically the energy folks and the power producers that are starting to get engaged in Bitcoin, they start out and they can just see the hornet's nest humming, and they can, whenever someone says it's not backed by anything, they're like, well, that's something
backed by energy.
And then they know that there's a market that they can sell it to, and that's real. They don't have to understand why it's liquid, but it is, and that there is this combination of technology and energy and money, and in Bitcoin they are one. It's just a matter of all of those human resources and the human capital and the physical capital figuring out. It's why we're doing the Houston Bitcoin meetup. Putting those people in the same room will accelerate the convergence, and the acceleration of that convergence will create value. And that, you put different people from different backgrounds, like you're talking about, walking around, Oklahoma. I don't know if it was oil fields or, nat gas, but that those people have different backgrounds, but they've got different capabilities, and they've all got something to add to the same thing. And it will be a very powerful force. It's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it, to say the least. Super bullish on the space. I think it's going to be one of the biggest growing industries over the next decade at least. So I think that you're going to see just a lot of opportunity if you're forward thinking,
or even backward thinking. Like Henry Ford, 1921, so like 100 years ago, said you need if you want to stop wars, like he who controls the gold is going to be financing wars, right? But his thesis was like an energy currency is like the total take the gold out of control. You cannot control it. And like Bitcoin solves it.
Yeah.
I mean, took 100 years, but
yeah, it is literally converting energy into a monetary unit, and energy can't be faked. And proof of work. And that idea of proof of work mining, most people probably don't know what these words mean, but it is what ensures that the Bitcoin network is secure and that people can't debase the currency, and that no one's in control, because what's happening right now is there is a land grab, and everyone that's paying attention is going out and trying to find the cheapest sources of power to most efficiently hash the proof of work function. And
with the longevity environment.
Yes. And that is what secures the network. And what I reinforce for people is if you do not pay attention and get involved, you will get left behind, because most things like Bitcoin is the greatest innovation of our generation and will be for, in my view, generations. With most innovations, it's a luxury. It's something, they create the TV, they create the telephone, make a better baseball stadium. And first it's a luxury, and then it turns into a commodity. In the case of Bitcoin, money is the most basic necessity. And if you close your eyes and you don't pay attention, there is a consequence. You will get left behind. It's not just about, quote, making money, but your business will be obsoleted. Somebody else will look at it and they will capture an opportunity. And if you're not securing your own balance sheet with Bitcoin, you're not going to have a business. And so the stakes are high, is what I like to tell people, and that it is over $1 trillion. It has been operating for 12 years. This city in particular is primed to be a hub, and we just have to get the people to turn the lights on.
Yeah, well, I think that's starting to happen, and I think that it's only going to accelerate. And
shareholders about to be demanding that these oil and gas companies start having some sort of mining going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're starting to see demand for people to have exposure to it, and so it's going to be really exciting over the next few years at least. So, guys, if you're listening to this podcast and you're interested in Bitcoin mining, you can reach out to myself. You can reach out to Griffin. If you guys need solutions for custody, you can reach out to Unchained, and need to make sure to check out the Bitcoin meetups. Is there actually a place to find the schedule for the Bitcoin meetups? I know they're supposed to be secret, but I think Mario literally invited me online. I'm like, it's not so secret.
Yeah. So it was funny because I think the one in August, we had a CNBC reporter, and I thought the article was actually great, but whoever the editors were wrote a title about secretive meeting to talk about Bitcoin and energy. It's like, if you follow me on Twitter, Parker A. Lewis, I tweet about it literally every single day, and it's on meetup.com. We do want people that are genuinely interested in Bitcoin. They don't have to be experts in Bitcoin. They want to know. We publicize it for the one in Austin and the one in Houston. They're both on meetup.com. I think it's Houston Bitcoin Meetup Group. The one in Austin is Austin Bitcoin Developers. But yeah, if anybody follows me on Twitter, they can't miss it. I throw it in their face all the time. And what I do tell people is, if you come, you've seen it, but if you come to the Bitcoin Meetup, no pun intended, but you will feel an energy. And that alone will help you understand that this is not just digital beanie babies. There's a world of 1,000 cryptocurrencies. I tell people, I only own one, I only work on one, and I understand why. And there's a way to understand why, and it's Bitcoin. But the Houston Bitcoin meetup, if for people that are local here or in Austin Bit Devs, Austin Bitcoin Developers meetup, you step one foot in that door and you will have a different perspective on what is happening.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I agree with that so much. When you get around people that are smart, they're intelligent, and they're dedicating their time and energy to this, you realize like, oh shit, this is real. And so, yeah, definitely guys, come out to the Bitcoin meetup. Even if you don't know anything and you're just wanting to possibly learn and expand your knowledge and start getting your feet wet. And it's a great place just to come meet people. We'll I'll see if I can get a link to the meetup. We'll put it in the show notes. Maybe we'll throw it up on the website as well. So, guys, appreciate you coming on the show. I think that
Thanks for having me.
It's probably first of many pieces of content that we create on Bitcoin and oil and gas, because I think that the conversation is just going to keep evolving and developing. So, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate you having us.
All right, guys. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to the Oil and Gas Startups podcast. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, any of your favorite podcast players. Also find us on YouTube if you want to see our beautiful faces on video. Drop an episode once a week. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter on digitalwildcatters.com, the BDE newsletter, Big Digital Energy. We'll catch you guys next week.